Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxhorn, and this is the story of Vim. Vim is a regional soda for Maine in the fictional Fallout 4 universe. It has striking similarities to Moxie, which is the real-life regional soda for Maine. We're introduced to Vim with the Far Harbor DLC for Fallout 4. Instead of Nuka-Cola products, Vim products dot the land. The Vim headquarters and bottling factory plays a significant role in the primary plot of Far Harbor. The factory is a treasure trove of information about the company. Vim was founded by Herbert Reed in 1931. The company struggled to be recognized nationally, but they did really well regionally in Maine, to the point that they were officially recognized by local Maine government as the Taste of Maine. If you take a tour of the Vim factory, you see that the inside of the factory has a facsimile building on the interior. You learn that this is a reproduction of the original factory, which burned down in 2026. We learn a lot about how Vim markets itself by reading Norman Fuller's terminal. Norman is the head of marketing. He has an important role in deciding what new beverages are being produced and how they market those beverages. One of the biggest projects he's been working on is the Escape to Adventure marketing campaign. They released a new Vim marketing campaign that's got this female fighter pilot who flies a biplane in some sort of explorer campaign. People are really responsive to the Escape to Adventure marketing campaign, but the company is having a hard time casting the female star of the campaign due to lack of funds. They also have a hard time giving her a name. Nuka-Cola, of course, has the Nuka Rocket Girl, an iconic figure with the rocket blaster and the tight space jumpsuit. Cute, sexy, sells cola well. Vim has this Escape to Adventure biplane pilot. Doesn't really have a name, nothing comes to mind immediately. Not quite as memorable as the Nuka Girl. Norman is also working on the Vim Ambassador project. Everyone in the company is really excited about this. The Ambassador project involves finding and hiring a Vim Cola ambassador, putting that person in a suit of power armor, painting the power armor up in Vim colors, and having them visit popular areas to hand out Vim Cola. A pretty fun marketing campaign, and this is the idea of Norman Fuller. But Norman's biggest project recently has been trying to come up with a new line of cola. To do this, he reaches out to Iris Mason, who's in charge of research and development. Norman tells Iris to develop a new kind of cola that acts as the taste of Maine. Iris responds with incredulity. She says, "Sure, Norman, I'll put fog in a bottle, or maybe we'll put lobster and fiddleheads in there, or maybe I'll put a plaid shirt in there." She thinks the entire idea is ridiculous, but after some coaxing from the CEO, she finally sits down and starts to work on a recipe. We find out from her terminal that she actually experiments with putting fish in the recipe. She does so initially just as a way to get Norman off of her back, but people end up liking it. They think that, yeah, it tastes a little fishy, but it's kind of good. Norman calls this formula, which was codenamed 10784, the Vim Captain's Blend. And he's really excited to get the ball rolling. So is the CEO. But Iris, the person who designed and developed it, is trying to pump the brakes. She emails the CEO and says, "Look, I know you're all really excited about this, but this literally has fish in it. Maybe we should hold off on making it part of the Vim lineup." So they released the Captain's Blend as a regional testing drink. It's not fully available nationally yet. They haven't officially made it part of their lineup. They're still testing it. That's why when you find bottles of the Captain's Blend around Far Harbor, the label of the bottle actually says testing on it. There are also some side effects with this beverage. We learned from some terminals that some of the customers, even though they like the taste of it, complain that their sweat smells a little fishy afterwards, which is disgusting. It's really gross to read about that. Some of the customers are saying that after you drink a bottle of Captain's Blend, you smell like a pier. Iris tells a story about a fisherman she talked to who said that after drinking the Captain's Blend, lobsters were more docile in the lobster traps, that the lobsters were less inclined to attack. And the funny thing about Vim Captain's blend is if you take a look at the bottle, one of the effects is that sea creatures are less likely to attack you. Drink a bottle and stand around some mirelurks to see the effect. Everyone's really excited about the new Captain's Blend, but nobody more so than Doyle Reed, the CEO of Vim. Apparently, he's like the great-great-great-grandson of the founder, Herbert Reed. So the Vim company is still in the family business. When you discover his terminal, you realize that his life is not all rosebuds. He's dealing with a lot. One of the biggest issues he's dealing with is a potential violent takeover by the Nuka-Cola Company. This all started when the Vim Company lost the trademark battle for the Quartz brand. Vim had a brand called Vim Quartz. You can find bottles of Vim Quartz all over the place. But Nuka-Cola sued them and won. This is because, as we learn from the Nuka World DLC, the Nuka-Cola Company has their own version of Nuka Quartz. Even though Vim had their Vim Quartz first, the Nuka-Cola Company won the litigation, and Doyle Reed, the CEO, is worried that they'll have to stop sales of Vim Quartz. That's why so much depends upon the success of the Vim Captain's Blend. Even though he's so excited, he still agrees with Iris to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, which is why they're only testing it regionally. But his troubles continue. As successful as the ambassador program is, recently there have been some issues. When we find the terminal for Willis Rudd, who's in charge of the manufacturing and distribution department, we learn that one of the ambassadors, whose name was Alex, was attacked at a pub by a girl who punched him in the eye. The problem is that the girl then went to the media and told the media that he grabbed her. Now, there are plenty of witnesses, up to 4 witnesses, who attest to the fact that the girl just flat out punched him in the face out of the blue, that he didn't even look at her or even talk to her. But the local media is giving sympathy to the girl, and it's looking poorly for the Vim Company. Now, even though the Ambassador project is the brainchild of Norman in marketing, Willis in manufacturing and distribution is in charge of transporting the power armor, getting the Ambassador Alex into the power armor, kind of accompanying him, so on and so forth. In fact, it was he and some of his co-workers that were in the pub with Alex when Alex was attacked. They were first-hand witnesses to the confrontation. Willis sends a letter to Doyle, the CEO, complaining about how he feels like this is a targeted attack, that it doesn't feel right. And this wasn't the only incident. He complains about how trucks have been stolen, trucks have been shot at, drivers have been jumped. He feels like this is a straight-up attack on the company. Many of the people in the manufacturing and distribution department are feeling the brunt of this attack firsthand. The executives in the corporate headquarters aren't feeling this attack. It's the people who are driving the trucks. It's the people who are loading up the power armor or using the power armor that are feeling the attacks. So Willis is frustrated. This is his department. He doesn't feel like the executives are taking him seriously. And so he kind of starts to rally his employees to talk about how they can protect themselves from this. Doyle, to his credit, tells Willis that he has a lot of respect for Willis. Willis has been around for a very long time. He's been in the company back when his father ran the place. And he says, look, I believe you. I'm going to pay the bail for Alex. Trust me, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Just please don't rile up the coworkers. We really need to avoid having a big, huge confrontation here. The last thing they need is an internal panic. But someone who doesn't really believe him is Madison Young. I'm having a hard time nailing down exactly what her role is in the company. She appears to have some sort of role in finance, because she tells Willis that she's not prepared to give the employees hazard pay, which of course is really frustrating to Willis and his team, which stokes the flames of them wanting to kind of meet and cause a panic. She tells Willis that he's blowing things out of proportion, that it's not a conspiracy, it's just a series of random events. Here they are going out, trying to do their job, driving trucks, using power armor when they get attacked and shot at, and the company is not willing to grant hazard pay? It seems odd. Now, Madison has a good reason for not granting hazard pay. The company just doesn't have a lot of money. And that's an accurate assessment of the financials for the company. Maybe they don't have the money to grant hazard pay, but it certainly doesn't boost morale within the company. Madison has conflict with a lot of other people at the company. She reaches out to Norman and tells him that even though he's really excited about the Escape to Adventure marketing campaign, and even though it's testing really well, that they just can't go forward with any of the TV ads. There's no funding. She also gives Iris Mason a hard time. Iris is sitting there trying to come up with a new brand of cola, and Madison is getting on her case about her expense reports. She complains. She says, "Why did you spend $10,000 at a fish market? What does that have to do with soda?" And then she kind of vaguely threatens her by saying, "Look, you're not in trouble yet, but..." We all know what it means when someone says something like that. And finally, she has conflict with the CEO himself. She's constantly trying to talk him in to selling the company to Nuka-Cola. She tries to make him feel naive and silly for wanting to keep the company a family company. She's been meeting a lot with a representative from Nuka-Cola named Vernon Conroy. Doyle is upset about this. He feels like Madison is going behind his back. But Madison defends herself by saying, "Look, the investors of our company are already considering selling their stock to Nuka-Cola directly through Vernon. What did you expect me to do?" If that were to happen, according to Madison, all Nuka-Cola would need is a 5% share of the company to have a seat at the board. Once they had a seat at the board, then they could get all sorts of secrets about the Vim Corporation, including recipes. It appears that Madison is the go-between between Nuka-Cola and Vim. When Vernon Conroy ups his offer to buy the company by 5%, it's not Doyle Reed he reaches out to, it's Madison Young. Madison dutifully reports this to Doyle and even seems to argue for it, saying, "Would it really be that bad to work under the Nuka-Cola brand?" Poor Doyle Reed. He fights to keep the company alive, and he fights traitors within his ranks. So all of this leaves us with a few questions. What was with all of the attacks on the Vim Corporation? Who is stealing all of the power armor? Well, if you travel northwest of the Vim bottling plant, you find an unmarked gas station that's got 3 or 4 ghouls inside. Around back, you find a hatch to an underground bunker. Inside the bunker, you find a firing range, a bunch of weapons, and a terminal. The terminal belongs to somebody named Aubrey Copeland. In it, we learn that Aubrey is a Nuka-Cola employee whose goal it is to sabotage the Vim Corporation. She breaks down this sabotage into 3 phases. Phase 1 is low-level discouragement. She just does small things like removing Vim signs and swapping bottles with something disgusting to diminish the Vim brand in Maine. It's also during Phase 1 that she makes contact with Madison Young. That's right, the very same Madison Young who denied Willis and his employees the hazard pay, who's getting on Iris's case about the amount of money she's spending on research for Captain's Blend, who told Norman in marketing to stop spending money on TV ads, and who's constantly pestering Doyle to sell the company. Phase 2 is Escalation. Here we see hard evidence that Aubrey Copeland was responsible for theft of power armor, attack on workers, and the destruction of property. She even gives her reasons. She wants to make it obvious to the workers themselves that they are being targeted and that they are under attack, but not so obvious that the higher-ups would want to trigger an investigation. She believes that this strategy would lead to dissent within the ranks, and that's exactly what we find happening. Willis is already trying to organize the manufacturing and distribution teams to meet and talk about protecting themselves, causing Doyle Reed, the CEO, to fear panic. We also find out that it was Madison who gave Aubrey the list of Vim's investors. Nuka-Cola wouldn't be able to reach out to the investors of Vim individually and offer them a price for their stock if they didn't have the list of investors. Madison is responsible for giving the list to Nuka-Cola. Ouch! Treason! On a more personal level, we discover that Madison kind of has a crush on Aubrey. Now, Aubrey is both a male and female name, so I don't know the gender of this Aubrey Copeland. I'm guessing it's a woman, because it was a woman who punched Alex in the face and gave him a black eye and hospitalized him. Now, that woman wasn't Madison, because everybody knows Madison. So if that woman wasn't Aubrey, then Aubrey must have conscripted some other woman to just flat out punch a guy in the face and then disappear, which I think is unlikely. We also learned that Aubrey is familiar with military tactics. I mean, she's shooting at trucks, destroying trucks, shooting at employees, stealing power armor. She has this whole covert operations thing going on underneath a gas station. I'm pretty sure she's going to be able to punch a guy out. But the name is gender neutral, so I suppose it could be a man. Anyway, Madison has a bit of a crush on Aubrey. Aubrey writes about this and says, you know what, Madison isn't so bad looking, maybe I should take her out bowling, plus it's going to be good cover. So we learn a little bit about Madison's motives for betraying her company. Apparently she did so because she had a crush on a girl. Yeah. Phase 3 appears to come out of nowhere. Aubrey is surprised by the success of Captain's Blend. Of course, she's in Maine, she's doing all of this research. She's going to hear about the testing phase for Captain's Blend. Nuka-Cola wants the recipe. She keeps leaning on Madison to try and prod Madison to get the recipe. But so far, research and development hasn't given it up. So 3 cheers to Iris Mason. Her cautiousness about not rushing too quickly with the Captain's Blend thwarted Aubrey and Nuka-Cola from getting the recipe. This also can help explain why Madison Young wanted an explanation as to why Iris spent $10,000 at a fish market. If she could get Iris to divulge exactly what she bought at the fish market, then she could basically give a recipe to Nuka-Cola. Anyway, Aubrey reveals that she tried to recreate the taste of the Captain's Blend herself, but she failed. You can see a chemistry station covered in bottles of Captain's Blend in the bunker. The final entry in this terminal is really disturbing. On the day of nuclear Armageddon, Aubrey Copeland hears the sirens and thinks it's a drill, but she decides to use this as an opportunity to attack the Vim headquarters with a missile launcher. That's right, she straight up goes to Vim headquarters, missile launcher on her shoulder, and attacks the bottling plant with a missile launcher. What the heck? Who does that? If you go back to Doyle Reed's terminal and take a look at his final entry, you actually see the attack take place. As he's writing his final entry, he says, "Oh God, there was just an explosion at the bottling plant. I gotta get out of here." Who would attack a soda pop company? Nuka-Cola would attack a soda pop company. Directly outside his door, we find a host of skeletons. There's a skeleton on a pipe leading away from the factory. There are skeletons in the rubble just outside the factory. Is one of these skeletons the skeleton of Doyle? Or Aubrey? I guess we'll never really know. Fast forward to the present, and let's talk about the history of Vim now. At some point in time, Super Mutants took over the factory. What a bummer. The place is littered with meat bags, chewed up skeletons. It's just horrible and nasty. You have to fight your way through the factory, shooting up all sorts of Super Mutants. But something interesting happened here. In one of the terminals, you discover that a Super Mutant with excellent grammar and perfect spelling starts to wonder why he's doing the things he's doing. What we see here is we see a super mutant slowly wake up to the fact that he's a super mutant and that murdering people might be wrong and that there's really no need to eat humans when there's all of this wonderful game on the island. He tries to talk with the other super mutants, but they make fun of him and say that he's becoming weak like a human, and the leader of the super mutants, a big one named Grun, actually takes a swipe at him. In another terminal, we find, again, grammatically correct and properly spelled text warning us that he has locked Grun behind the door. If you unlock the door, you get to have a fun conversation with good old Grun. What's really interesting about this is what the super mutant says. He says that he's not sure if it's the Vim Cola or the bottling plant or what, but he has slowly kind of gotten out of his super mutant mindset, which means the bloodlust and madness caused by Fev can be cured. By Vim Cola? Are they trying to tell us that Vim Cola cures Fev? Seems a little strange. So who is this guy? Well, if you find Horizon Flight 1207, you discover that it is inhabited by a super mutant named Erickson. This super mutant is wearing what appears to be a bear head as a hat. What's funny about him is that he is sane. He speaks slowly and clearly, and he's a merchant. He sells you dogs. He's got a soft spot for dogs. If you have dog meat with you when you discover Erickson, he'll give dog meat a blue bandana. He sells more than just junkyard dogs. He also sells mutant hounds and wolves that you can assign to your settlements. I did an entire other video on this. It's a pretty cool character. Anyway, Erickson is the super mutant that was at the Vim Factory and imprisoned Grun behind the door. Maybe I'll have to do a video someday on whether or not Fev can be cured, and what this means for humanity, and what it means for the Brotherhood of Steel and how they approach super mutants. But that's a video for another day. So, what is the recipe for the Vim Captain's Blend? Madison wanted it, the Nuka-Cola Company wanted it, everybody was asking about it, and Iris was keeping it quiet. Well, if you go back to the Vim bottling plant, you can actually get recipes for all of the Vim Cola so that you can craft them at your chemistry station. The official recipes for crafting the Vim Captain's Blend is 1 Aster, 1 Mirelurk meat, and 1 Vim. But Mirelurk didn't exist when the Captain's Blend was first created. So what are Mirelurks? Well, I mean, they've got lobster claws and they've got big shells. They definitely seem to have evolved from some crustaceans of some kind. But if you dig enough in Iris's terminal, you get the exact ingredients of the pre-war Vim Captain's Blend. They include fiddleheads, lobster shells, aster, and cloves. All boiled together with regular old Vim. So since Vim is based on real-world Moxie, I suppose you could make your own Captain's Blend by grabbing some Moxie, boiling it with fiddleheads, lobster shells, aster, and cloves, and sending your friendly neighborhood Oxhorn a bottle who will gladly drink it on air. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was a whole lot of fun to put together. If you like videos like these, please subscribe for more Fallout 4 lore videos and Fallout 4 videos in general. I make a new video every day, and if you like what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon supporters get access to my private Discord server. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just glad you're here watching. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.